The crack of a gunshot split the morning air, but Rosalie Montgomery didn't flinch. She stood on the sagging porch of the dilapidated ranch house she'd just inherited, watching as a group of men on horseback circled menacingly in the distance. At 23, most women in 1878 New Mexico territory would have been terrified, but Rosalie simply reached for the Winchester rifle propped against the wall. "You can fire all the warning shots you want, Tucker Jenkins." She called out, her voice carrying across the drought-hardened soil of what was now her land just outside Santa Fe. "This ranch belongs to me now, and no amount of intimidation is going to change that." The man at the front of the pack spurred his horse forward, dust billowing behind him as he approached. His face was weathered from years under the harsh southwestern sun, his expression a mixture of amusement and contempt. "Your uncle was a fool, and now you're carrying on the family tradition," he sneered, tipping his hat back to reveal cold eyes. "A woman running a ranch, you'll be broke and begging by winter if the Apache don't get you first." The other men laughed, the sound cutting through Rosalie like a knife. But she'd heard worse in the 3 days since she'd arrived from Boston after her uncle's unexpected death. The laughter, the mockery, the disbelief, it was all becoming familiar. "I seem to recall my uncle refused to sell this land to you multiple times, Mr. Jenkins," she replied coolly. "I understand why that might make you bitter." Jenkins' face darkened. "This land's worthless anyway, 1,500 acres of nothing but dust and scrub. Your uncle never could make it pay, and neither will you." "We'll see about that." Rosalie tightened her grip on the rifle. She wasn't entirely comfortable with the weapon, but they didn't need to know that. A rider separated himself from the group, approaching slowly with hands raised in a gesture of peace. Unlike the others, his clothing was practical rather than flashy faded denim, worn boots, and a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned, muscular forearms. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered with several days' worth of stubble. "Miss Montgomery," he said, his voice deep but gentle. "Owen Larson, I worked for your uncle." Rosalie studied him carefully. "Mr. Larson. My uncle mentioned you in his letters. Did he now?" There was something like surprise in his tone. "He said you were the only honest cowboy in the territory." A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "That's generous of him." "Look, these men," he jerked his head toward Jenkins and his companions. "They're all talk, but running this ranch alone, that's not just talk, that's impossible." Jenkins laughed again. "Listen to Larson, girl, he's trying to save you from yourself." Rosalie straightened her spine. The Eastern dress she wore felt suddenly restrictive, impractical for this new life. "Mr. Larson, are you still employed by this ranch?" Owen hesitated. "Technically, I suppose I am. Then I suggest you get to work. The rest of you," she leveled her gaze at Jenkins and his men, "are trespassing on private property." Jenkins spat on the ground. "Your funeral, Miss Montgomery, when you're ready to sell, and you will be ready, you know where to find me." He wheeled his horse around. "Come on, boys. Let's leave the lady to her delusions." As the men rode away, Owen remained, watching Rosalie with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You realize you just made an enemy of the most influential rancher in the county?" he asked. Rosalie set the rifle down carefully. "I realized that when I read my uncle's will and saw his notes about Jenkins trying to pressure him into selling." Owen dismounted, tying his horse to the porch rail. "Your uncle was stubborn, but he knew cattle. What do you know about ranching, Miss Montgomery?" "Nothing," she admitted. "But I'm a quick study, Mr. Larson." "Owen," he corrected. "And being a quick study might not be enough. This land needs water development, better breeding stock, more hands." He gestured to the neglected buildings and sparse cattle visible in the distance. "I have some money saved," Rosalie said. "My parents left me a modest inheritance. I was going to use it to open a bookshop in Boston." Owen's eyebrows rose. "And instead, you're here." "Uncle James was my only remaining family when his letter came asking me to visit." She shrugged. "I never expected to inherit a ranch, or the troubles that come with it," Owen added quietly. "I won't sell to Jenkins, not after what my uncle wrote about him." Owen studied her for a long moment. "Then you're going to need help, real help." "Are you offering, Mr. Larson?" "Owen," he reminded her again. And yes, I suppose I am. Your uncle saved my life once, gave me a job when no one else would. I owe him. Rosalie smiled for the first time that day. Well then, Owen, I accept, though I should warn you I plan to make significant changes around here. What kind of changes? The kind that will turn this ranch profitable, the kind that will wipe the smug expressions off those men's faces. She looked out at the land stretching before her, parched, challenging, and now hers. They may be laughing now, but they won't be for long. Owen's expression was unreadable. That's a tall order, Miss Montgomery. Rosalie, she corrected, and tall orders are my specialty. Little did either of them know how those words would be tested in the months to come, or how their lives would become inextricably entwined as they fought to transform a failing ranch into something worth fighting for, something worth loving. The next morning came with the harsh reality of ranch life. Rosalie woke before dawn, her body aching from the unfamiliar mattress. Through the window, she could see lantern light already moving in the distance. Owen, beginning his day's work without waiting for her direction. The sight both annoyed and impressed her. Dressing quickly in the most practical clothing, she had a simple skirt and blouse that would soon prove inadequate for ranch work. Rosalie made her way to the kitchen. The previous housekeeper had left with Rosalie's arrival, another vote of no confidence in her ability to maintain the ranch. As she struggled to light the stove, the back door opened. Owen entered, removing his hat respectfully. You're up early, he observed. Is there another appropriate time to rise on a ranch? She countered, still fighting with the stove. Without comment, Owen moved beside her, expertly adjusting the damper and lighting the fire. Breakfast is important, he said. Hard work needs fuel. I know how to cook, Rosalie said defensively. City cooking or ranch cooking? The question wasn't mocking, merely practical. Rosalie sighed. I suppose there's a difference. Men working cattle burn through food like you wouldn't believe. Your uncle used to say feeding ranch hands is like trying to fill a bottomless pit. Well, currently we have a shortage of hands to feed, Rosalie observed, looking through the meager pantry supplies. About that. Owen leaned against the counter. I took the liberty of sending word to a few good men I know, trustworthy cowboys looking for work. Rosalie turned to him sharply. Without consulting me first, you hired me to help, he said simply. This is help. Jenkins has been spreading word that this ranch is failing, that you'll be gone by winter. Good hands won't come unless they're personally invited by someone they trust. The logic was sound, but Rosalie still felt undermined. In the future, Mr. Larson, Owen. Owen, I expect to be consulted on decisions regarding my ranch, he nodded, accepting the rebuke. Fair enough, but these men will expect to be fed when they arrive for interviews. Rosalie looked at the pantry again. We'll need supplies. Town's an hour's ride. We could go after checking the North Pasture cattle. Unless you'd prefer to go alone, Santa Fe can be unwelcoming to newcomers, especially women looking to do business. Rosalie thought of the mocking laughter from Jenkins and his men. No, your company would be appreciated. But first, show me the ranch, all of it. I need to understand what I'm working with. After a simple breakfast, Owen saddled 2 horses. He watched with unveiled surprise as Rosalie mounted competently. My uncle insisted I learn to ride during his visits east, she explained, adjusting her skirt as best she could over the saddle. He said no niece of his would grow up without knowing horseflesh. James had strong opinions, Owen agreed with a hint of fondness. This way. The morning passed in a tour that left Rosalie increasingly concerned. The ranch, which her uncle had named Esperanza, the Spanish word for hope, was larger than she'd realized, but its problems were equally substantial. Fences sagged where they existed at all. The cattle were too few and too thin. A creek that should have provided water had nearly dried up. The drought's been hard, Owen explained as they rode. Your uncle was trying to dig a new well when he fell ill. How many cattle do we have? About 300 head, mostly mixed breeds, not the best stock. And how many should a ranch this size support? Owen considered. With proper water and grazing management, 2,000, maybe more. Rosalie's heart sank. We're that understaffed. It's not just staff, it's infrastructure, breeding, stock, water rights. He pointed to distant hills. Jenkins controls the watershed up there. He's been diverting more than his share. Is that legal? Legal and common are different things out here, Owen said diplomatically. By midday, they'd return to the main house to prepare for the trip to town. Rosalie disappeared into her room, emerging in her finest dress, complete with a stylish hat and gloves. Owen stared. We're going for supplies, not to meet the governor. First impressions matter, Mr. Larson. If I'm to be taken seriously as a businesswoman, I need to look the part. He seemed about to argue, then simply shrugged. Your choice. The wagon's ready. The journey to Santa Fe was uncomfortable in more ways than one. The rutted road made every bump a jarring experience, and Rosalie quickly regretted her formal attire as dust coated the fabric. Owen drove in silence for the first 20 minutes before curiosity got the better of him. Why did you come? He finally asked. You could have sold the ranch from Boston, never set foot here. Rosalie watched the landscape roll by before answering. My uncle's letters. For years, he wrote about this place like it was paradise on earth. Even as his health failed, he never lost faith in what Esperanza could become. James was an optimist. He was more than that. He believed in creating something lasting. My parents died when I was young, my father in the war, my mother from pneumonia shortly after. Uncle James was my only family, though he visited rarely. His letters were my connection to him. Owen nodded. He mentioned you, said his niece had more spine than most men he knew. Rosalie smiled slightly. He exaggerated. I'm not so sure about that, Owen replied, looking at her with new respect. Taking on a failing ranch in hostile territory isn't for the faint of heart. Is that what we are, failing? Owen's hands tightened on the reins. Not yet, not if we're smart. The conversation lulled as Santa Fe appeared in the distance, adobe buildings glowing warmly in the afternoon sun. Despite its territorial status, the town had a surprising bustle about it, with horses and wagons crowding the main street and people of diverse backgrounds moving purposefully along the boardwalks. It's larger than I expected, Rosalie commented. It's growing. The railroad's coming through soon. That's partly why Jenkins wants your land. It's positioned well for the expected route. This was new information. My uncle didn't mention that. He might not have known. The surveys were only completed recently. Rosalie filed this knowledge away carefully. Where do we start? General store for supplies, then the feed merchant. After that, the bank. You'll want to establish yourself with Mr. Peterson. The general store proved to be the first test of Rosalie's resolve. As she and Owen entered, conversations died away. The proprietor, a portly man with a waxed mustache, looked up with a welcoming smile that faded when he recognized Owen. Mr. Larson, he said stiffly. What can I do for you today? Owen nodded respectfully. Mr. Winters. This is Miss Montgomery, James Montgomery's niece and the new owner of Esperanza Ranch. The storekeeper's eyebrows rose as he examined Rosalie. Indeed, we heard James had passed. My condolences, Miss Montgomery. Thank you, Rosalie replied. We need supplies for the ranch. I have a list. As she handed over the paper, a voice called from the back of the store. Montgomery's place still operating. Thought for sure it'd be sold by now. Rosalie turned to see a weather-beaten man lounging against a barrel of flour. His clothes marked him as a rancher, prosperous enough to shop in town rather than order through catalogs as many remote ranchers did. The ranch is very much in operation, Rosalie replied evenly, and expanding, in fact. This brought chuckles from several corners of the store. Owen shifted uncomfortably beside her. Expanding into what? Dust farming? The man asked, prompting more laughter. Jenkins says that land's not worth the taxes owed on it. Mr. Jenkins seems very concerned with my property, Rosalie observed coolly. Perhaps he should focus more on his own affairs. The storekeeper cleared his throat nervously. Miss Montgomery, some of these items will need to order special, take a week or more to arrive. That's fine, Mr. Winters. We'll take what you have today and arrange delivery for the rest. As the storekeeper began assembling their order, the rancher pushed off from the barrel, approaching Rosalie with undisguised curiosity. I'm Walter Simmons, he introduced himself. Run the Broken S east of here. Rosalie Montgomery. She offered her hand, which he shook with surprise. You really planning to work that land yourself? No husband, no foreman? I have Mr. Larson, Rosalie replied, nodding toward Owen, "and plans for improvements that will make Esperanza profitable again." Simmons laughed, but not unkindly. "Lady, I admire your spirit, but that land's been failing for years. James was a good man, but a terrible rancher. No offense to the departed," he added hastily. "Perhaps what the ranch needed was simply a new perspective," Rosalie suggested, "a female perspective." Another voice chimed in mockingly. Rosalie turned to face the new speaker, a young man barely out of his teens with the arrogant posture of someone used to deference. "Bennett Jenkins," Owen murmured in her ear. "Tucker's son." Rosalie straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Jenkins. I believe I met your father yesterday. He was trespassing on my property." Bennett's face reddened. "My father doesn't trespass, madam. He was probably just checking on old James's stock, being neighborly." "How thoughtful. In the future, such neighborliness won't be necessary." The younger Jenkins stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're out of your depth, Miss Montgomery. That ranch is worthless without water rights, and my father controls those." "We'll see about that," Rosalie replied, refusing to be intimidated. "Your bill, Miss Montgomery," Mr. Winters interrupted, clearly eager to diffuse the tension. $37.14. Rosalie opened her handbag and counted out the money, aware of the eyes watching her. The sum was substantial, nearly a month's wages for a working man, but she handed it over without comment. "Thank you, Mr. Winters. We'll return next week for the ordered items." As they loaded the supplies into their wagon, Rosalie could feel the stares from the store's porch, where Bennett Jenkins and several others had gathered to watch. "That went well," Owen remarked dryly as they pulled away. "Did it? I feel like I just faced a firing squad. You stood your ground." "That counts for something around here." The bank proved another challenge, with Mr. Peterson initially reluctant to transfer her uncle's meager accounts without mail authorization. Rosalie's Eastern education and firm grasp of banking law eventually prevailed, though the banker made his disapproval clear. "Your uncle was often behind on his obligations," Peterson informed her delicately. "His reputation for financial reliability was not strong." "I understand," Rosalie replied. "That will change under my management." The feed merchant, at least, was more practical. Once Rosalie demonstrated her willingness to pay in cash, his reservations about dealing with a woman rancher evaporated. As they headed back to Esperanza in the late afternoon, the wagon considerably heavier with supplies, Rosalie's mind raced with plans and calculations. "We need water," she said suddenly. "Without it, nothing else matters." Owen nodded. "The well your uncle started, it's a good location. With enough manpower, we could finish it before winter." "How many men would we need?" "4, maybe 5 good workers. And these men you've sent for? 3 should arrive by the end of the week. Solid cowboys, if they're available." Rosalie did the mental arithmetic. "Not enough. And we need specialized skills for well digging." Owen glanced at her curiously. "You're thinking of something?" "In Boston, I helped manage my aunt's charitable society. We built a school for immigrant children. I learned that the right workers for specialized tasks are worth their weight in gold." She paused. "Is there a newspaper in Santa Fe?" The New Mexican publishes weekly. "Perfect. Tomorrow I'd like to place an advertisement." Owen raised an eyebrow. "For ranch hands, that's not usually how it's done, not just any ranch hands. I want men with specific skills, well digging, irrigation, breeding expertise, and I'm willing to pay above the going rate." "That'll get Jenkins' attention for sure." "Good," Rosalie said firmly. "Let him pay attention. Let everyone pay attention. They're all so certain I'll fail. Their certainty will be their weakness." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "You're not what I expected, Miss Montgomery." "Rosalie," she corrected. "And what did you expect? A grieving niece, overwhelmed by her inheritance, eager to sell and return east." She smiled. "The grieving part is accurate, the rest. Well, I've never been one to run from a challenge, Mr. Larson." "Owen," he reminded her, returning her smile. As Esperanza appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the setting sun, Rosalie felt a strange mix of dread and determination. The task ahead was monumental, the odds stacked against her. But looking at the land, her land, she felt something else too, a sense of possibility that she'd never experienced in Boston's structured society. They're all waiting for me to fail, she said softly. Every last one of them. Owen followed her gaze to the ranch. Not everyone, he replied, his voice equally quiet. Not me. For the first time since receiving news of her uncle's death, Rosalie felt she might not be alone in this fight after all. 2 days later, Owen returned from town with the first edition of the New Mexican containing Rosalie's advertisement. The bold headline read, "Experienced ranch hands wanted premium wages for premium skills." Below, it detailed specific qualifications, knowledge of water management, breeding programs, modern ranching techniques, and construction. "This is causing quite a stir," Owen reported, handing her the paper. "Peterson at the bank asked if you'd lost your mind offering these wages." "And what did you tell him?" Rosalie asked, scanning her advertisement with satisfaction. "That Miss Montgomery knows exactly what she's doing." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Though I admit I'm not entirely sure that's true," Rosalie laughed. "I'm spending money to make money, Owen. Quality workers will save us time, and time is something we don't have much of before winter." The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Owen's hand instinctively moved toward the gun at his hip, relaxing only when he recognized the riders. "That'll be Miguel and the Rodriguez brothers," he said, "the men I sent for." Rosalie smoothed her skirt, a more practical one than she'd worn to town, and stepped onto the porch to greet her potential employees. The 3 riders dismounted, removing their hats respectfully. The leader, a man of perhaps 30 with a weathered face and intelligent eyes, stepped forward. "Miss Montgomery, I am Miguel Vasquez. These are Tomás and Francisco Rodriguez. Owen sent word you were looking for hands. Mr. Vasquez, gentlemen, thank you for coming. Please join us inside." The interview process was brief but informative. All 3 men had worked neighboring ranches for years. They knew the land, understood the challenges, and most importantly to Rosalie seemed unbothered by the prospect of working for a woman. "The pay is fair," Miguel said when she outlined her terms. "But why us?" "Many cowboys in the territory need work. Mr. Larson vouched for your character," Rosalie replied, "and I need men who won't be distracted by taking direction from a woman." The men exchanged glances. Tomás, the elder Rodriguez brother, spoke up. "With respect, miss, it is unusual. But a job is a job, and Owen says you have plans to improve this place." "Substantial plans," Rosalie confirmed, "beginning with water access and new breeding stock. Are you interested?" All 3 men nodded. By sundown, Esperanza Ranch had 3 new employees, with promises of bunkhouse accommodations and regular meals included in their compensation. "It's a start," Owen acknowledged as they watched the men settle into the long-neglected bunkhouse. "But we'll need more hands when your advertisement brings results." "If it brings results," Rosalie corrected, "I'm still an unknown quantity here." The next morning brought surprises. First, a wagon appeared carrying an elderly Chinese man who introduced himself as Lai Wai. "I see advertisement," he explained in accented English, presenting the newspaper. "I dig wells for railroad, for mines, many wells, good wells." Rosalie's excitement was tempered by caution. "Mr. Lai, your experience sounds valuable, but this is demanding physical work." The old man smiled, revealing several missing teeth. "I not dig alone, I know how, I direct." He gestured to the incomplete well site. "Your uncle, he dig wrong place, water deeper there." He pointed to a spot 30 feet away. "Better there." Owen, who had joined them, looked skeptical. "How would you know that?" Lai tapped his nose. "I smell water. 50 years I find water never wrong." Rosalie glanced at Owen, who shrugged slightly. "We could test his theory before committing to full employment," she suggested quietly. And so, with Miguel and the Rodriguez brothers providing the labor under Lai's direction, work began on a test dig at the spot he had indicated. By late afternoon, at a depth of just 10 feet, the soil had changed from dusty to damp. "Water coming," Lai announced confidently. 2 more days, plenty water. The second surprise came as dusk approached. A single rider appeared, a woman sitting tall and confident on a magnificent Appaloosa horse. Her clothing was practical split riding skirt, sturdy boots, and a man's shirt, and a rifle was secured to her saddle. "That's Ruth Blackwood," Owen murmured as they watched her approach. Best horse breeder in the territory. Widow runs a small operation near Albuquerque. The woman dismounted gracefully, leading her horse to where Rosalie and Owen stood, Miss Montgomery. Her voice was strong, her handshake firmer still. I read your advertisement. You're looking for breeding expertise. I am, Rosalie confirmed, trying not to show her surprise at the woman's directness. You have experience, Ruth Blackwood snorted. 15 years breeding the finest horses in New Mexico. Started with my husband, continued after he passed. Your uncle bought 2 mares from me years back. Yet you've come yourself rather than sending a foreman. Ruth's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm my own foreman, Miss Montgomery. Just as you appear to be your own rancher, I thought we might understand each other. Rosalie couldn't help smiling. I believe we might, Mrs. Blackwood. Ruth, the woman corrected. And I'm interested in your cattle operation, not just horses. Saw you're paying premium for premium. I know bloodlines, breeding cycles, calving. Increased my own herd's value threefold in 5 years. The discussion that followed convinced Rosalie that Ruth Blackwood was exactly the kind of expert she needed. By nightfall, Ruth had agreed to split her time between her own property and Esperanza, bringing her knowledge and connections to quality breeding stock in exchange for a partnership arrangement that could benefit both operations. 2 women running ranches, Ruth remarked as they concluded their agreement. The men won't know what hit them. The following days brought more responses to the advertisement. A former Army engineer named Daniel Cooper arrived with extensive irrigation experience. 2 young cowboys from failing ranches to the north appeared, eager for steady work. Even a cook presented himself, a former chuck wagon man named Joseph who had tired of traveling with cattle drives. Within a week, Esperanza's bunkhouse was full, and the ranch hummed with activity. Wise water prediction proved accurate, with a strong well delivering clean, cool water by the week's end. Under Ruth's direction, the existing cattle were evaluated, with the poorest specimens marked for sale and the best identified for breeding. Tucker Jenkins made his displeasure known through intermediaries and rumor. Word spread that he considered Rosalie's operation a threat and her methods inappropriate. When his son Bennett appeared at Esperanza's boundary one afternoon, Owen intercepted him before he could reach the main house. Just delivering a message from my father, Bennett insisted, handing over a sealed envelope. The note inside was brief. Miss Montgomery, your recent activities have disrupted the established order of ranching operations in this region. I am prepared to offer a fair price for your property to restore harmony. Consider this generous offer carefully. T. Jenkins. Rosalie read it aloud to Owen, Ruth, and Miguel, who had become her unofficial council of advisors. Generous offer, Ruth scoffed. He's worried is what he is. Your well has already increased this property's value. And he knows the railroad survey favors this land, Owen added. The spurs they're planning would make transportation to markets much easier. Miguel nodded. My cousin works for the survey team. They believe the route will pass within 2 miles of this ranch house. Rosalie considered the note again. Mr. Jenkins isn't accustomed to competition, or to being refused, Ruth added, especially by women. Then he'd better develop a tolerance for both, Rosalie decided, tearing the note in half. Owen, please inform young Mr. Jenkins that Esperanza Ranch is not for sale now or in the future. As October gave way to November, the transformation of Esperanza continued. Fences were mended, additional wells dug, and the first new breeding stock arrived. 20 prime Hereford heifers and 2 bulls, purchased through Ruth's connections at a fraction of the market price. The local reaction to Rosalie's success was mixed. Some neighboring ranchers watched with cautious interest, occasionally stopping by to observe the improvements. Others, particularly those aligned with Jenkins, maintained a hostile distance. In town, opinions divided largely along the same lines. On a crisp November morning, Rosalie rode with Owen to check the northern pasture, where the new cattle had been placed. The air was cool but not yet winter cold, and the improved water access had already begun to green the landscape in small but noticeable ways. Lai says the second well should be producing by next week, Owen reported as they rode. That will give us enough water to expand the herd by spring. Rosalie nodded, making mental calculations. Ruth believes we can double our numbers by next fall if the breeding program goes well. They crested a small rise, providing a view of the valley below where the cattle grazed contentedly. In the distance, the mountains stood sentinel against the blue sky dusted with early snow. "It's beautiful," Rosalie said softly, reining her horse to a stop. "I see now what my uncle loved about this land." Owen halted beside her. "It gets under your skin, the vastness of it, the challenges, the rewards. I never expected to feel this way about a place." She turned to him, noticing how the sunlight caught the gold flecks in his hazel eyes. "In Boston, everything was mapped and measured and known. Here there's possibility." Something shifted in Owen's expression, a softening, a moment of unguarded admiration. "You've accomplished more in 2 months than your uncle did in years." "We've accomplished it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Owen." The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with unspoken feelings. Then the sound of gunfire shattered the peace. Owen reacted instantly, pulling his horse close to Rosalie's and scanning the horizon. That came from the east pasture. They rode hard toward the sound, finding Miguel and Francisco engaged in a standoff with 3 mounted men at the property line. One of the strangers had a smoking gun pointed skyward, clearly having fired the warning shot they'd heard. Problem. Owen called as they approached. Miguel's face was tight with anger. "These men say they are taking water from our new east well. They claim Mr. Jenkins gave them permission." The leader of the 3 strangers' ranch hands by their appearance shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "We got orders from Tucker Jenkins himself, said this water's on disputed land." "There is no dispute," Rosalie stated firmly, urging her horse forward. "This is Esperanza land and has been for 30 years. Your boss knows that." "Madam, we're just following orders." "Then follow this order instead," Owen interrupted, his hand resting casually near his holstered gun. "Leave Esperanza property now and inform Mr. Jenkins that any future water theft will be treated as the crime it is." For a tense moment, it seemed the men might argue further. Then the leader nodded curtly, gesturing for his companions to follow as he turned his horse away. "Jenkins won't like this," Miguel observed as they watched the men retreat. "Jenkins doesn't have to like it," Rosalie replied. "But he does have to respect our boundaries." That evening, as the ranch hands gathered for supper in the newly renovated bunkhouse dining area, Rosalie discussed the incident with her core team. Ruth's assessment was blunt. "He's testing you, seeing how far he can push before you push back." "The water situation threatens him most," Lai added, sipping the tea he preferred to coffee. "Control water, control territory." Owen nodded agreement. "The drought has everyone concerned, but Jenkins has always diverted more than his share from the watershed. Our wells change that balance of power." "Then we need to secure that power," Rosalie decided. "Daniel, how quickly can we expand our water storage capacity?" the engineer considered. "With proper materials and labor, I could build 2 large cisterns before the heavy snows. That would give us reserve capacity for the winter and early spring." "Do it," Rosalie authorized. "Whatever you need, purchase it." As the meeting concluded and the others drifted away to their evening tasks, Owen lingered. In the lamplight, his features seemed softer, the habitual wariness momentarily absent. "You've changed," he observed. "Have I? When you first arrived, you were determined but uncertain. Now you speak with authority. The men respect that." Rosalie smiled. "Is that a compliment, Mr. Larson?" "Owen," he corrected automatically, returning her smile. "And yes, it is." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Rosalie felt a flutter of something unfamiliar yet not unwelcome. Before she could examine the feeling, Joseph called from the kitchen, asking about breakfast plans for the next day. The moment passed, but its impact lingered. As Rosalie prepared for bed that night, she found herself thinking not of cattle or water rights or Jenkins' threats, but of the way Owen's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, a rare but increasingly frequent occurrence. Winter descended on Esperanza with surprising swiftness. By early December, Snow dusted the higher pastures, and preparations for the harsh season occupied everyone's attention. The cisterns Daniel designed were completed just before the first major snowfall, providing crucial water security. The ranch house itself underwent transformation as well. With Joseph's help, Rosalie had restored the long-neglected rooms to comfort, if not luxury. The kitchen now functioned properly, the roof no longer leaked, and the main rooms were heated adequately by repaired fireplaces and newly installed stoves. Christmas approached with a festive air that surprised Rosalie. She had expected the holiday to be subdued, given their remote location and the predominantly male workforce. Instead, she discovered that ranch traditions ran deep. Miguel's wife and children, who had joined him at Esperanza once housing was improved, brought decorations they had made. Joseph planned an elaborate Christmas dinner. Even Lai Y, who did not celebrate the Christian holiday, contributed by crafting ingenious wooden toys for Miguel's children and the children of the other married hands who had relocated their families to the ranch. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, the main house became the gathering point for the entire Esperanza community. Rosalie, watching her employees know, her people sharing food and laughter, felt a profound sense of accomplishment unlike anything she'd known in Boston. Owen found her standing by the window observing the scene. "Penny for your thoughts," he asked, offering her a cup of mulled cider. "I was just thinking that my uncle would be pleased," she replied, accepting the drink. "This is what he wanted for Esperanza, a true community." "You've done more than create a community," Owen said quietly. "You've given people hope, jobs, purpose." The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the cider. "We've done it together." In that moment, with the firelight casting golden shadows across his features, Owen Larson looked at her with an expression that made her heart quicken. He was no longer just her foreman, her advisor, her friend. He was becoming something more, something she hadn't anticipated when she'd inherited this remote ranch. "Rosalie," he began, his voice lower than usual. The door burst open, admitting a snow-covered Ruth Blackwood. "Sorry to interrupt the festivities," she announced, stamping her boots on the threshold, "but I've just come from town with news you'll want to hear." The moment between Rosalie and Owen dissolved as they turned their attention to Ruth. Her news was indeed significant. The railroad's final survey had been completed, and the route would pass within a mile of Esperanza's southern boundary. "Construction begins in spring," Ruth reported. "They'll need water supplies, possibly even beef for the workers." "That's tremendous news," Rosalie exclaimed. "The transportation access alone will change everything." "Jenkins knows," Ruth added, her expression sobering. "He was in the surveyor's office when the announcement was made. He didn't take it well." Owen's face darkened. "He'll make another move." "This raises the stakes considerably." The celebration continued, but Rosalie's mind now worked on multiple tracks: joy for the railroad's proximity, strategic planning for the opportunities it presented, and concern about Jenkins' potential reaction. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Owen's presence nearby and the unfinished moment between them. As guests departed and the house quieted, Owen helped bank the fires and tidy the main rooms. They worked in companionable silence until only the kitchen remained. "Thank you for your help," Rosalie said as they completed the last of the cleaning. "It was a lovely evening." "It was," Owen agreed. Then, with sudden decisiveness, "Rosalie, what I was going to say earlier," she turned to face him fully, heart racing. "Yes." "I've never met anyone like you," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "Your courage, your vision, your kindness, they've changed this place, changed me." Rosalie stepped closer to him. "Owen, let me finish," he said gently. "I know I'm just your foreman. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this might be inappropriate, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is simply respect or friendship." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Rosalie felt a surge of emotion, fear, excitement, and something deeper that had been growing for months. "You're not just my foreman," she replied softly. "You never have been. You're the person who believed in me when no one else did. The person who taught me this land, who stood beside me through every challenge." Owen's eyes never left hers. "And what does that make me to you?" Instead of answering with words, Rosalie closed the remaining distance between them. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that answered his question more eloquently than speech could have. His response was immediate and tender. His hands came to rest lightly at her waist, steadying but not constraining her. The kiss deepened, months of unacknowledged feelings finding expression in this single perfect moment. When they finally separated, Owen's smile was transformative, erasing years of hardship from his features. "I've wanted to do that since the day you stood up to Jenkins on your porch." Rosalie laughed softly. "I was terrified that day. Never would have guessed it," he replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with gentle fingers. "You faced down the most feared man in the county without blinking." "I had good reason to be brave," she said. "This land is worth fighting for." "And now?" Owen asked, his expression growing serious. "What are we fighting for now?" Rosalie took his hand in hers, feeling the calluses earned through years of honest work. "Something even more valuable, I think." The winter months passed with unexpected swiftness. January brought heavy snows that isolated Esperanza from town for nearly 3 weeks, but the preparations Rosalie had insisted upon ensured that the ranch weathered the isolation without hardship. The cattle, sheltered in protected valleys and supplemented with stored feed, maintained their condition despite the harsh weather. February saw the completion of plans for spring expansion. With Daniel's irrigation designs, Ruth's breeding expertise, and Lai's water management, Esperanza was positioned to double its effective grazing land when the thaw came. Rosalie's initial investment was nearly depleted, but the ranch's improved condition now supported credit at the bank, a fact that astonished Peterson when Owen presented their projections. Throughout these developments, Rosalie and Owen's relationship deepened. They maintained professional boundaries during working hours, but evenings often found them sharing meals, plans, and increasingly, their hopes beyond the ranch's immediate needs. The ranch hands observed the changing dynamic with knowing smiles but respectful silence. March brought the first signs of spring and with it, renewed tensions with the Jenkins operation. Railroad surveyors appeared regularly, marking the route that would soon transform the region's economy. Tucker Jenkins made no secret of his displeasure, especially when the surveyors established a base camp on Esperanza land with Rosalie's permission. "You're playing with fire," Ruth warned during one of her visits. "Jenkins has friends in territorial government. He could make trouble." "Let him try," Rosalie replied with newfound confidence. "Our water rights are legally documented now, our boundaries clear. What can he do?" The answer came on a mild late March day. Rosalie was reviewing breeding records with Ruth when Miguel burst into the house, his expression grave. "Riders coming," he reported tersely. "Many riders, Jenkins leads them." Owen, who had been repairing tack in the adjacent room, immediately moved to the window. "At least 15 men," he confirmed, his voice tight. "Armed." Rosalie felt her stomach clench, but her voice remained steady. "Miguel, gather the men. No one draws weapons unless absolutely necessary." "Ruth, I'll stay with you," the older woman interrupted firmly. "2 women are harder to intimidate than 1. By the time Jenkins and his party reached the ranch house, Esperanza's entire workforce had assembled on and around the porch. Owen stood slightly ahead of the group, his posture relaxed but alert. Jenkins reined his horse to a stop, surveying the gathering with obvious disdain. "Quite the welcome committee, Miss Montgomery." "Mr. Jenkins," Rosalie acknowledged, stepping forward to stand beside Owen. "This is an unexpected visit." "Is it? I thought I'd made my intentions clear months ago." Jenkins dismounted, handing his reins to his son Bennett. "You're continued. Expansion has become problematic for the region." "For you, perhaps," Rosalie corrected. "The rest of the region seems to be adapting well to progress." Jenkins' eyes narrowed. "Progress? Is that what you call stealing water from established ranches, disrupting traditional grazing patterns? Undermining the natural order of things?" "I call it innovation," Rosalie replied calmly, "and proper resource management. Every drop of water on Esperanza is legally ours, documented and registered with the territorial authorities." Documents can be challenged, Jenkins said dismissively. Especially when they're obtained through irregular means. Owen stepped forward. There was nothing irregular about our water rights registration. Everything was done by the book. Says the man sleeping with the boss, Bennett Jenkins called from horseback, his voice laden with innuendo. The crude comment sent a ripple of tension through both groups. Owen's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but Rosalie placed a restraining touch on his arm. "I'd advise your son to guard his tongue, Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice cool but edged with steel. "Slander is an ugly business." The elder Jenkins shot his son a quelling look before returning his attention to Rosalie. "I've come to make a final offer, Miss Montgomery. Sell Esperanza to me, all 1,500 acres, water rights included, for $15,000. That's generous considering the condition of the place when you inherited it." The sum was substantial, more than triple what the property had been worth the previous spring, but far less than its current value with the improvements and the railroad's imminent arrival. "The ranch is not for sale," Rosalie stated firmly. "Not to you, not to anyone." Jenkins' face darkened. "I had hoped reason would prevail, since it hasn't." He gestured to his men, who began to spread out around the property. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Owen demanded, his hand now resting openly on his holstered gun. "Making a point," Jenkins replied. "Your fancy wells, your new fences, your precious breeding stock, none of it matters if you can't protect it." Ruth stepped forward, her weathered face tight with anger. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Tucker." "An observation," he corrected smoothly. "Things happen in these parts, accidents, mishaps. Would be a shame if those new Herefords wandered off, or if a well collapsed, or if fire struck during a dry spell." The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. Rosalie felt her people tensing around her, ready to defend what they had built together. Violence seemed inevitable until a new voice joined the confrontation. "That's enough, Jenkins." All heads turned to see Sheriff Robert Martinez approaching on horseback, accompanied by 3 deputies and, surprisingly, Mr. Peterson from the bank. "Sheriff," Jenkins acknowledged, his confidence visibly faltering. "This is a private business discussion." "Threatening destruction of property isn't business," Martinez replied, dismounting smoothly. "It's criminal intimidation." Peterson cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Jenkins, as I tried to explain in town, the Territorial Bank Commission has reviewed Miss Montgomery's operation and found it exemplary. Her water management innovations are being cited as models for sustainable ranching. The commission would take a very dim view of any interference." Rosalie couldn't hide her surprise. "Mr. Peterson, I had no idea the commission's representative visited last week," the banker explained. "He was most impressed with what you've accomplished in such a short time. Which reminds me," he withdrew an envelope from his coat pocket, "this arrived for you by special courier, from the Territorial Governor's office." Jenkins' face had gone from confident to ashen as Peterson spoke. Now, watching Rosalie accept the mysterious envelope, his expression hardened into bitter resignation. The letter inside was brief, but momentous. The governor was establishing a special commission on water rights and sustainable ranching practices and requested Rosalie's participation as a founding member. "It seems," Rosalie said, looking up from the letter, "that Esperanza's methods have attracted attention beyond our little corner of the territory." Sheriff Martinez stepped closer to Jenkins. "Now, I suggest you and your men leave Esperanza property immediately. Unless you'd prefer to discuss threatening a respected rancher from the comfort of my jail." For a long moment, Jenkins seemed to weigh his options. Then, with a curt nod to his men, he remounted his horse. "This isn't over, Montgomery," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Actually, Mr. Jenkins, I believe it is," Rosalie replied. "You've built your empire on control of resources that rightfully belong to all ranchers in this region. That era is ending. You can adapt or you can fight progress and lose." Jenkins offered no response beyond a venomous glare before wheeling his horse around and leading his men away from Esperanza. As the dust settled, Sheriff Martinez approached Rosalie and Owen. "Been waiting for someone to stand up to that man for years," he said with grudging admiration. Though you might want to keep extra guards on your wells and stock for a while, men like Jenkins don't surrender easily. We'll take precautions, Owen assured him. Thank you for your timely arrival. Thank Peterson, Martinez replied with a nod toward the banker. He heard Jenkins organizing his men in town and rode out to warn me. Peterson looked embarrassed by the acknowledgement. The Territorial Bank has invested in Esperanza's expansion, he explained, simply protecting our interests. Rosalie smiled knowingly. Of course, Mr. Peterson. Pure business considerations. As the sheriff, his deputies, and Peterson departed, the Esperanza workers dispersed to their duties, the excitement of the confrontation giving way to the routine demands of ranch life. Ruth nudged Rosalie gently. So, a gubernatorial appointment. Getting fancy in your old age, Rosalie laughed. Hardly old at 23. Ancient by frontier standards, Ruth teased. Nearly an old maid, unless... Her gaze shifted meaningfully to Owen, who was speaking with Miguel nearby. Rosalie felt her cheeks warm. That's a discussion for another time. Don't wait too long, Ruth advised. Good men are scarcer than water in these parts. That evening, with the ranch settled into watchful calm, Rosalie and Owen walked along the creek that had once been nearly dry but now flowed steadily thanks to their water management efforts. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and amber, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. Do you ever miss Boston? Owen asked suddenly. Rosalie considered the question seriously. Sometimes the libraries, the concerts, the predictability of city life. But she smiled at his perception. But I've found something here I never had there, purpose, challenge. The chance to build something meaningful. Owen stopped walking, turning to face her. And us, where do we fit in this vision of yours? The directness of the question took her breath away. Owen, you are the vision. Everything I've accomplished here, everything we've accomplished began because you believed in me when you had every reason to doubt. He took her hands in his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. I more than believe in you, Rosalie. I love you. Have loved you, I think, since that first day when you faced down Jenkins with nothing but determination and a rifle you barely knew how to use. Joy bloomed within her, bright and undeniable. And I love you, not just for your support, but for your strength, your integrity, your kindness. Owen's smile was radiant as he pulled her gently into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the passion of feelings long contained but now gloriously free. When they finally separated, breathless and smiling, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I don't have much to offer besides hard work and loyalty, he said softly. But if that's enough, if I'm enough, I'd be honored to stand beside you for all the days to come. As your husband, if you'll have me. Rosalie's heart felt too full for her chest, happiness spilling over in joyful tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. Spring blossomed fully across Esperanza in April, bringing with it remarkable changes. The railroad construction began in earnest, creating opportunities that Rosalie seized without hesitation. Contracts to supply beef to the work crews. Agreements for water access from Esperanza wells. Leasing of land for temporary worker housing. Each arrangement brought income that was immediately reinvested in the ranch's expansion. By May, the herd had doubled. By June, 3 new wells were operating, and Daniel's irrigation system was transforming formerly barren sections into productive grazing land. Tucker Jenkins maintained a hostile distance, but his influence waned as Esperanza's success inspired other ranchers to adopt similar innovations. Several approached Rosalie directly, seeking advice or partnerships. By midsummer, a cooperative had formed among the smaller operations, creating a counterweight to Jenkins' once unchallenged authority. Throughout these developments, preparations for Rosalie and Owen's wedding proceeded with the same efficiency that characterized all Esperanza operations. The ceremony was scheduled for September, when the most intense work of the season would be complete and the weather still favorable. In late August, as the wedding approached, an unexpected visitor arrived at Esperanza. The buggy that pulled up to the main house was expensive, the driver well-dressed in city clothes. Rosalie, returning from the south pasture with Owen, watched curiously as a distinguished older gentleman descended from the vehicle. Miss Montgomery, the man called, removing his hat. Harold Winchester, representing the Western Cattle Association. The name was familiar. The association was the largest ranching organization in the territory, traditionally dominated by established operations like the Jenkins Ranch. Mr. Winchester, Rosalie acknowledged, dismounting. This is a surprise. A pleasant one, I hope, Winchester replied, his manner courteous but businesslike. I've come on behalf of the association's board to discuss your methods, your water management techniques specifically. Owen, now standing beside Rosalie, exchanged a questioning glance with her. The association hasn't historically been interested in innovation, he observed cautiously. Winchester smiled ruefully. True enough, Mr. Larson, but circumstances change. The drought has worsened in the southern regions. Traditional methods are failing. Your success here has become relevant to our interests. Rosalie gestured toward the house. Please join us inside where it's cooler. We'd be happy to discuss our approaches. The conversation that followed was revelatory. The association, facing unprecedented challenges from climate and market pressures, had finally recognized the need for adaptation. Winchester had been dispatched to learn from Esperanza's example and to extend an unprecedented invitation. Would Rosalie consider presenting her water management methods at the association's annual meeting in Santa Fe? It would be the first time a woman has addressed the General Assembly, Winchester admitted. There will be resistance from some quarters. From Jenkins, you mean, Owen said bluntly. Winchester didn't deny it. Mr. Jenkins represents an older perspective, that is, increasingly at odds with current realities, but he remains influential. Rosalie considered the invitation carefully. The association has historically supported policies that favored large operations over smaller ranches. Would my participation signal a change in that approach? Winchester looked surprised, then thoughtful. You're well informed, Miss Montgomery. Yes, there is an ongoing debate within the association about future direction. Your voice would strengthen the progressive faction. Then I accept, Rosalie decided. On one condition, that representatives from the small ranchers cooperative we've established are also invited to attend. The negotiation that followed demonstrated how far Rosalie had come from the uncertain Bostonian who had arrived at Esperanza a year earlier. By the time Winchester departed, he had agreed not only to her condition, but to the establishment of a special committee on sustainable ranching practices with guaranteed seats for smaller operations. You realize what you've done? Owen asked as they watched Winchester's buggy disappear down the road. You've just changed the power balance of ranching in the entire territory. Rosalie smiled, leaning into his side. We've changed it, all of us at Esperanza. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Have I told you lately how extraordinary you are? Not since breakfast, she replied lightly. I was beginning to worry. September 15, 1879 dawned clear and perfect over Esperanza Ranch. The wedding day had arrived, and with it a gathering unlike any the region had seen. Ranchers from across the territory, large operations and small alike, had come to witness the union of Rosalie Montgomery and Owen Larson. Even Mr. Peterson from the bank appeared, bringing a delegation of territorial officials curious about the operation they had heard so much about. Tucker Jenkins was conspicuously absent, but his absence only highlighted how much had changed. Several of his former allies attended, having recognized that the future lay in cooperation rather than domination. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful, held in the meadow near the creek that had once been nearly dry but now flowed strong and clear. Ruth stood as Rosalie's witness, Miguel as Owen's. The territorial judge who performed the service noted that he had never before conducted a wedding where the bride owned more land than most small towns. By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, the judge concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. As Owen kissed his bride, cheers erupted from the assembled guests. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, a joyful testament to the community that had formed around Esperanza's revival. When the last guest had departed and the ranch house quieted, Owen led his new wife onto the porch. The night was cool, stars brilliant in the clear desert sky. In the distance, the lights of the railroad camp twinkled, a promise of connections yet to come. Happy? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Rosalie leaned back against his chest, secure in his embrace. Completely. Though there's still so much to do, the association meeting next month, the new breeding program Ruth wants to implement. Daniel's expanded irrigation plan, Owen's chuckle interrupted her list, always planning the next improvement. It's what I do, she replied with a smile. Does it bother you? Quite the opposite. He turned her gently to face him. Your vision is what saved this ranch. What gave all of us a future here, including me. Rosalie reached up to touch his face, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. Do you remember what you said when I first arrived, that running this ranch alone was impossible? I remember, he acknowledged. I've never been happier to be proven wrong. Not wrong, she corrected, just incomplete. I couldn't have done it alone. We did it together. Their kiss beneath the stars sealed a partnership that had already transformed a failing ranch into a model operation. But more than that, it celebrated a love that had grown from respect to friendship, to something deeper and more enduring than either had imagined possible when fate first brought them together. As October's chill settled over the land, Rosalie and Owen traveled to Santa Fe for the Western Cattle Association's annual meeting. The presentation on Esperanza's water management techniques was received with enthusiastic interest by most attendees. The Small Ranchers Cooperative found new allies among forward-thinking larger operations. The association's leadership, recognizing the shifting landscape, began drafting new policies that would benefit the entire region rather than just the established elite. Tucker Jenkins made a final attempt to undermine Rosalie's influence, presenting a motion to restrict association membership to ranches with at least 5 years of continuous operation, a transparent effort to exclude Esperanza and its allies. The motion was decisively defeated, marking the end of Jenkins' dominance. Winter came again to Esperanza, but this time without the uncertainty that had characterized Rosalie's first months on the ranch. The expanded herd was healthy and protected. The wells produced abundantly, despite seasonal changes. The railroad, now complete to within 3 miles of the ranch, provided reliable transportation for Esperanza beef to markets as far away as Denver and St. Louis. On Christmas Eve, 1 year after Rosalie and Owen had acknowledged their feelings for each other, the community gathered once more at the main house. The celebration was joyful but held an additional layer of meaning this year. Rosalie's announcement that spring would bring not only new calves to Esperanza, but a new generation of the Larson family as well. As the new year of 1880 dawned, Rosalie stood on the porch of the home she had transformed, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Owen joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the morning chill. Thinking deep thoughts, he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Remembering, she replied. When I first arrived, Jenkins and his men laughed at the very idea of me running this ranch. Now some of those same men have come asking for work. It was true. As Esperanza prospered and Jenkins' operation floundered under outdated methods, several of his former hands had approached Owen about positions at the expanding ranch. Karma, Owen observed with satisfaction, though you've been generous in hiring them. The ranch needs good workers, Rosalie said practically, and everyone deserves a second chance. Owen's hand covered hers where it rested on her abdomen. What do you think our child will make of all this someday? This empire you've built from a failing ranch? Rosalie smiled, leaning into his strength. Our child will know that anything is possible with vision, determination, and the right partners, that laughter and mockery are just noise that fades away when you stay true to your purpose. And that their mother is the most remarkable woman in the territory, Owen added, his voice warm with pride. Their parents, Rosalie corrected gently. We did this together, remember? As the sun rose fully over Esperanza, painting the expanded ranch buildings and thriving pastures in golden morning light, Rosalie Montgomery Larson savored the quiet triumph of a journey that had begun in doubt but flowered into extraordinary success. The laughter that had once stung now seemed distant and insignificant. The mockery had transformed to respect, even admiration. The struggling ranch had become a model operation, its methods studied and replicated across the territory. But beyond these external validations, Rosalie treasured the deeper victories. The community they had built, the innovations they had pioneered, the love she and Owen had found amid the challenges. And now, the promise of new life, a continuation of what they had begun together. Esperanza Hope had proven to be not just the name of her ranch, but the foundation of a legacy that would endure long after those who had once laughed had been forgotten. "Come inside," Owen said softly after a while. "It's getting cold." Hand in hand, they turned toward their home, toward their future, leaving behind the doubts and struggles that had marked the beginning of their journey. Ahead lay new challenges, new triumphs, new joys to discover together a life neither had imagined possible when fate first brought them to this land that had tested them, transformed them, and ultimately rewarded their faith in each other and in themselves. As spring arrived in 1880, Esperanza Ranch continued its transformation from local success story to regional influence. The Western Cattle Association had adopted many of Rosalie's water conservation recommendations as standard practices. The railroad spur connecting directly to Esperanza land was completed, bringing with it unprecedented access to markets and supplies. The cooperative of smaller ranchers, with Esperanza as its anchor, had negotiated favorable contracts with meat processors in Denver and Kansas City. In May, as the range burst into unexpected bloom after gentle rains, Rosalie gave birth to a son they named James, after her uncle. The baby arrived with the same determination that characterized his mother, making his entrance into the world during a brief but intense thunderstorm that broke a 3-week dry spell a good omen, according to Lai Y. By his first birthday, young James was already showing signs of his parents' resilience. Tottering around the ranch house on sturdy legs, investigating everything within reach, he became the beloved center of the Esperanza community. Miguel's children appointed themselves his protectors. Ruth taught him to recognize different horse breeds before he could properly speak. Lai Y crafted ingenious wooden toys that delighted him for hours. The summer of 1881 brought news that Tucker Jenkins had finally sold his struggling operation to a consortium of investors from Chicago men, who promptly hired Daniel away from Esperanza to implement water management systems similar to those Rosalie had pioneered. "Should I be offended that they're copying us or flattered?" Rosalie asked Owen as they discussed Daniel's departure over dinner. "Definitely flattered," Owen replied, imitation being the sincerest form of flattery and all that. "Besides," Ruth added, having joined them for the meal, "they'll never match what you've built here. They have the techniques, but not the spirit." That spirit continued to attract notice beyond New Mexico territory. Agricultural journals published accounts of Esperanza's methods. Universities sent researchers to study the innovative water systems. A photographer from Harper's Weekly arrived to document the remarkable lady rancher of the Southwest for a feature article. Through it all, Rosalie maintained the practical approach that had served her from the beginning. Yes, the ranch had expanded to nearly 3,000 acres through strategic purchases. Yes, the herd now numbered over 2,000 head of prime cattle. Yes, Esperanza employed more than 30 full-time workers and their families. But each decision, each expansion, each innovation remained firmly grounded in sustainable practices and respect for the land. In the fall of 1881, as Esperanza prepared for another profitable season, Rosalie received a letter that brought her journey full circle. Bennett Jenkins, Tucker's son, requested a meeting not as an adversary, but as a young man seeking guidance. His father's failure broke something in him, Rosalie told Owen as they discussed the unexpected request. He seems genuinely interested in learning a different approach to ranching. Owen looked skeptical. The same Bennett Jenkins who made crude insinuations about us, who rode with his father to intimidate us. "People change," Rosalie said simply. "We've seen it happen here with some of Jenkins' former hands who now work for us." After consideration, they agreed to meet Bennett at a neutral location, the newly established hotel in Santa Fe that catered to the growing number of business travelers visiting the territory. The young man who greeted them bore little resemblance to the arrogant youth who had once mocked Rosalie's efforts. Humbled by his father's downfall and his own reduced circumstances, Bennett Jenkins spoke with genuine remorse about his past behavior. "I believed what my father taught me," he explained, his gaze direct but no longer challenging. "That strength meant control, that success meant others' failure, that a woman couldn't possibly understand ranching. And now," Rosalie prompted gently. "Now I've seen the results of that thinking," Bennett replied. "Our ranch gone, our reputation damaged, our methods proven obsolete." He hesitated before continuing. "I want to learn a different way, your way." The request was unexpected but not unwelcome. After discussion with Owen and the core team at Esperanza, Rosalie offered Bennett a position not as a privileged guest, but as an entry-level ranch hand who would earn advancement through merit rather than name. To everyone's surprise, Bennett accepted without hesitation. His integration into the Esperanza community was not without challenges, but his willingness to work hard and learn quickly won grudging respect from the other hands. By the following spring, he had earned a promotion to assistant herd manager, working directly under Ruth's supervision. "Who would have thought?" Ruth remarked to Rosalie as they watched Bennett capably directing a cattle drive preparation, "that Tucker Jenkins' son would become one of our most promising young managers." "People surprise you," Rosalie replied, bouncing 2-year-old James on her hip. "When given the chance to grow beyond others' expectations." The child squirmed to be put down, eager to explore as always. As Rosalie set him on his feet, keeping a watchful eye as he toddled toward the corral fence where Owen was working with a new horse, she felt a familiar flutter in her abdomen, the first movements of their second child, due in the fall. Life at Esperanza continued its rhythm of challenges met and overcome, innovations implemented, community strengthened. The railroad brought new opportunities and connections to the wider world, but the ranch maintained its character, a place where hard work was valued, where innovation was encouraged, where respect was earned rather than demanded. In the summer of 1883, as Esperanza celebrated 5 years under Rosalie's leadership, a special edition of the Territorial Agricultural Journal featured the ranch as its cover story. The article detailed the remarkable transformation from struggling operation to model enterprise, but what caught most readers' attention was the final paragraph. Perhaps most remarkable in the Esperanza story is not the impressive expansion of acreage or herd size, nor the revolutionary water management techniques that have been widely adopted throughout the region. Rather, it is the human element that distinguishes this operation from its peers. Where once Miss Montgomery, now Mrs. Larson faced mockery and predicted failure, she has created a community that nurtures innovation, rewards merit regardless of background, and demonstrates that sustainable practices can indeed be profitable. Many who once laughed at the notion of a woman running a cattle ranch now eagerly seek employment at Esperanza, where fair treatment and opportunity for advancement have become as much a trademark as the distinctive brand on the ranch's prize-winning cattle. On the evening after the journal was delivered to the ranch, Rosalie sat on the porch with Owen, watching the sunset paint the landscape in brilliant hues of orange and gold. Their daughter, Catherine, slept peacefully in her basket nearby while James played with wooden horses that Lai Y had carved for him. 5 years, Owen mused, his arm around Rosalie's shoulders. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you arrived with nothing but determination and a borrowed rifle. And sometimes it feels like I've been here forever, Rosalie replied, leaning into his embrace. As if Boston was just a dream I once had, Owen chuckled. I still remember Jenkins' face when you told him the ranch wasn't for sale, like you'd spoken in a language he couldn't understand. He understood power, Rosalie observed, just not all its forms. The ranch spread before them, vibrant with life and purpose. Workers returned from distant pastures, heading to homes that had grown increasingly comfortable as Esperanza prospered. Smoke rose from cook fires as families prepared evening meals. Children's laughter carried on the evening breeze. "We've built something remarkable," Owen said softly, his voice filled with pride. "We have," Rosalie agreed, watching as James abandoned his toys to climb into his father's lap. "Something lasting." As twilight deepened into night, stars appearing in the vast New Mexico sky, Rosalie reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The girl who had arrived from Boston, grieving her uncle and uncertain of her future, could never have imagined the life she would create here, the challenges she would overcome, the love she would find, the legacy she would build. The laughter that had once mocked her had long since faded, replaced by respect hard-earned and well-deserved. The ranch that had once teetered on the edge of failure now stood as a model for the future of Western ranching. The woman who had once been dismissed as an Eastern novelty had become a respected leader whose methods were studied and emulated throughout the territory. But beyond these external measures of success, Rosalie treasured the deeper achievements, the sustainable practices that respected the land, the community that supported its members, the family she and Owen had created together. These were the true riches of Esperanza Ranch, riches that would endure long after the last echoes of mockery had been forgotten. As Owen carried their sleeping son inside and Rosalie gathered Catherine's basket, she paused for one last look at the land that had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately rewarded her faith. The evening star shone brilliantly above the distant mountains, a fitting symbol for the hope that had guided her journey from its uncertain beginnings to this moment of fulfillment. "Coming, love," Owen called softly from the doorway, framed in the warm light of their home. "Yes," Rosalie answered, turning toward him with a heart full of gratitude for all they had built together. "I'm right here."